The sun beat down on the village of Kijiji, casting long shadows from the tall baobab trees that stood like ancient sentinels over the land. The people of Kijiji went about their daily work, tending to crops, fetching water from the river, and herding cattle. Laughter echoed from children playing in the dusty streets, their joy undisturbed by the troubles that weighed on the minds of the adults. In the largest house in the village, Zuri sat by the window, staring out at the world she had always known, feeling a growing sense of unease. Zuri was the daughter of Mzee Juma, the wealthiest man in Kijiji. Her father owned the most fertile lands, the healthiest cattle, and the finest house. People often whispered about how lucky Zuri was, how she had everything anyone could want. But as Zuri sat alone in her spacious room, her heart ached with a longing no one could understand. She had everything, yet she felt as if she had nothing. Her thoughts wandered to Jabari, the village's bravest warrior. Jabari was strong and fearless, with the kind of smile that made hearts race. But what Zuri admired most about him was his unwavering sense of duty. He protected the people of Kijiji, standing tall in the face of danger without hesitation. For years, Zuri had secretly loved Jabari. She had dreamed of a life with him, where they would rule the village together, powerful and admired by all. But her dreams were nothing more than fantasies. Jabari's heart belonged to someone else, Pendo. Pendo was unlike Zuri in almost every way. She lived in a small hut by the river with her aging mother, and her clothes were simple and worn. While Zuri was known for her beauty and status, Pendo was known for her kindness and gentle nature. She was always helping those in need, caring for the sick, and sharing what little she had with others. It was no surprise that Jabari had fallen in love with her. Zuri's chest tightened with anger and jealousy as she thought of them together. She could not understand why Jabari would choose someone like Pendo when Zuri had so much more to offer. "I am the one who should be by his side," she muttered to herself. She rose from her seat and looked at her reflection in the polished bronze mirror. Her dark skin glowed in the soft light of the setting sun, her curly hair fell in perfect waves, and the beads around her neck shimmered like stars. Zuri was beautiful, and she knew it. But beauty, it seemed, was not enough to win Jabari's heart. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Her father, Mzee Juma, entered the room, his face lined with worry. "Zuri," he said in a low voice, "trouble is coming." Zuri turned to face him, her brow furrowed. "What do you mean, father?" Mzee Juma sighed heavily and sat down on a stool by the window. "The neighboring villages are fighting over the river. They are angry that we control the best land, and they are coming for what we have. War is on the horizon." Zuri's heart skipped a beat. War. The very word sent chills down her spine. She had never known real hardship. Her life had been one of comfort and luxury. The idea that everything she knew could be taken away terrified her. "Jabari and the other warriors are preparing to defend the village," Mzee Juma continued. "But we must be ready for the worst." Zuri clenched her fists, her anger toward Pendo momentarily forgotten. She could not lose everything she had worked for, everything her family had built. If war was coming, she would fight with all her strength to protect what was hers. As the sun set and the village was bathed in a warm, orange glow, Zuri made a decision. She would not let Kijiji fall. And she would not let Pendo have Jabari. She would do whatever it took to claim what was rightfully hers. The night was heavy with tension. The usual sounds of the village, laughter, chatter, the distant hum of drums, were replaced by the quiet murmur of warriors preparing for battle. Jabari stood by the fire, sharpening his spear. His face was set with determination, but there was a softness in his eyes as he thought of Pendo. He loved her deeply, more than he had ever loved anyone. She was his light in the darkness, the one who kept him grounded when the weight of his responsibilities became too much. As he prepared for the battle that lay ahead, his thoughts were with her, hoping that she would be safe. Just then, Zuri approached him, her steps light and graceful. She wore her finest clothing, and her hair was adorned with beads that clinked softly as she walked. "Jabari," she said, her voice smooth and melodic, "may I speak with you?" Jabari looked up, surprised to see her. "Zuri," he greeted her, "what is it?" Zuri smiled, though her heart was pounding with nervous anticipation. She had rehearsed this moment in her mind 1,000 times. "I wanted to wish you luck in the battle," she said, stepping closer to him. "You are the bravest warrior in the village. I know that you will lead us to victory." Jabari nodded, grateful for her words. "Thank you, Zuri. I will do my best to protect the village." Zuri hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath. "Jabari," she began, her voice softer now, "I have always admired you. You are strong, courageous, and kind. I believe we would make a powerful pair. Together, we could lead Kijiji to greatness." Jabari's brow furrowed as he realized what Zuri was implying. "Zuri," he said gently, "you are a beautiful and strong woman, but my heart belongs to Pendo." Zuri's smile faltered, her heart sinking. "But why?" she asked, her voice tinged with desperation. "I could give you so much more than she ever could." Jabari shook his head, his expression calm but firm. "Love is not about what someone can give you. Pendo is the one who makes me whole. She is my heart." Zuri's chest tightened with anger and hurt. She had expected Jabari to be swayed by her beauty, her wealth, her power. But none of it mattered to him. All he cared about was Pendo. Without another word, Zuri turned on her heel and walked away, her mind racing. If Jabari would not choose her willingly, then she would find another way to get what she wanted. The next morning, war came to Kijiji. The warriors from the neighboring village stormed through the gates, their spears raised high as they charged toward the center of the village. Houses were set ablaze, crops were trampled, and the once peaceful village was thrown into chaos. Zuri watched from her window as the battle unfolded below. Her father had told her to stay inside, but she felt restless, helpless. She wanted to fight, to do something to protect her home. But as she watched the flames rise higher and higher, she realized that there was little she could do. In the midst of the chaos, she spotted Jabari, his spear flashing in the sunlight as he fought off the invaders. He moved with the grace and precision of a lion, every strike deliberate and deadly. But as Zuri watched him, she saw something else. He was protecting Pendo. Pendo stood behind Jabari, her hands trembling as she clutched a small dagger. She looked terrified, but Jabari shielded her from harm, his eyes never leaving her. Zuri's heart burned with jealousy. Even in the heat of battle, Jabari's thoughts were with Pendo. It was more than she could bear. As the battle raged on, Zuri made a decision. If she couldn't have Jabari's love, then no one would. That night, after the fires had been extinguished and the warriors had driven off the invaders, the village was eerily quiet. The people of Kijiji were exhausted, their homes and lives in ruins. But they were alive, and that was something to be grateful for. Zuri, however, felt no gratitude. She felt only bitterness and rage. As she lay in bed, her mind churned with thoughts of revenge. She couldn't stand the idea of Jabari and Pendo being together, happy and in love while she was left with nothing. She rose from her bed and quietly made her way to her father's study. Mzee Juma was asleep, exhausted from the day's events, and Zuri knew he wouldn't hear her. She opened the chest that held her father's most prized possessions, his weapons, his treasures, and, most importantly, his collection of potions and charms. Zuri had never believed in magic, but she was desperate. She rummaged through the chest until she found what she was looking for, a small, dark vial filled with a thick, black liquid. It was a potion that her father had obtained from a powerful sorcerer in a distant land. It was said to have the power to change fate itself. Zuri held the vial in her hands, her heart pounding. If she used the potion, she could change everything. She could make Jabari forget about Pendo, make him love her instead. She could have everything she had ever wanted. But as she stared at the vial, doubt crept into her mind. Was this really the way? Could she live with herself if she forced Jabari to love her? Her hands trembled as she uncorked the vial, the smell of the potion filling the room with a sharp, acrid scent. Just as she was about to pour it into a cup, a voice broke the silence. Zuri, what are you doing? Zuri spun around, the vial slipping from her fingers and shattering on the floor. Standing in the doorway was Pendo, her eyes wide with shock. Zuri's heart raced. How had Pendo found her? How had she known? What are you doing here? Zuri demanded, her voice shaking. I came to thank you for helping Jabari today, Pendo said, her voice soft. But now I see that you were planning something terrible. Zuri's chest tightened with guilt and shame, but she pushed it aside, her anger flaring. You don't understand, she hissed. Jabari is mine. He should have been mine all along. Pendo's expression softened with pity. Zuri, love cannot be forced. Jabari's heart is with me, but that doesn't mean you are unloved. You are strong, and you have a kind heart. You don't need to take what isn't yours. Zuri's eyes filled with tears, but she refused to let them fall. You don't understand, she whispered. I've always been alone. Pendo stepped closer, her hand outstretched. You don't have to be alone anymore. There is enough love in this village for everyone. You just have to let it in. Zuri stared at Pendo's hand, her mind swirling with emotions. She could feel the weight of her choices pressing down on her. She had been so focused on what she didn't have that she had lost sight of what was truly important. Slowly, hesitantly, Zuri reached out and took Pendo's hand. As Zuri grasped Pendo's hand, a warmth spread through her that she hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't the kind of warmth that came from pride or beauty or wealth, it was something deeper, something she couldn't quite explain. For the first time, she felt a crack in the wall she had built around her heart, and it frightened her. Pendo gave her a small, kind smile. Come, she said softly. Let's walk together. Zuri hesitated, her mind still torn between the bitter jealousy she had harbored for so long and the strange, unfamiliar feeling of peace that Pendo's touch had brought. But something inside her told her that this was the right path, and for once, she decided to follow her heart instead of her anger. They stepped out of the house into the cool night air. The village was quiet, with only the faint rustling of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl breaking the silence. The damage from the battle earlier that day was still visible, burnt-out huts, scorched fields, and broken spears littered the ground, but the worst of the danger had passed. The invaders had been driven away, and the people of Kijiji were safe for now. As they walked through the village, Zuri felt the weight of her actions pressing down on her. She had nearly destroyed everything in her pursuit of Jabari. She had been willing to risk the lives of others, even use dark magic, just to get what she wanted. The thought made her stomach turn. Pendo seemed to sense Zuri's inner turmoil and spoke gently. I know you've been through a lot, Zuri. It's hard to feel like you're not enough when everything around you tells you that you should have it all. Zuri looked down at the ground, guilt gnawing at her. I thought I deserved him, she murmured. I thought if I had him, everything would finally make sense. Pendo nodded. I understand. Love is a powerful thing. It can make us feel like we're missing something, like we need someone else to complete us. But Zuri, you are already whole. You don't need Jabari to make you important. You are important just as you are. The words hit Zuri harder than she expected. She had spent so much of her life trying to prove her worth, through her beauty, through her wealth, through her power. But for the first time, she began to wonder if maybe Pendo was right. Maybe she didn't need to fight so hard for the things she thought would make her happy. As they reached the edge of the village, Zuri stopped walking and turned to Pendo. "I don't know how to fix things," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know how to change." Pendo smiled gently. "It's not about changing who you are. It's about letting go of the things that don't serve you, jealousy, anger, fear, and embracing what's already within you. Kindness, strength, love. Those things are already a part of you, Zuri. You just have to choose them." Zuri swallowed hard, her throat tight with emotion. She had never thought of herself as kind or strong. But maybe, just maybe, there was a part of her that could be. Maybe she could be more than the jealousy and bitterness that had consumed her for so long. Pendo squeezed her hand. "Let's go back. The village needs healing, and so do you." Zuri nodded, feeling a strange mix of fear and hope swirling inside her. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time, she felt like she was ready to face it. As they walked back toward the heart of the village, the first rays of dawn began to peek over the horizon, casting a soft, golden glow over the land. The villagers were beginning to stir, emerging from their homes to assess the damage and begin the long process of rebuilding. In the distance, Zuri saw Jabari standing by the riverbank, his spear resting at his side. He was talking to some of the other warriors, his face still set in that determined expression she had always admired. But now, instead of feeling the sharp pang of jealousy, Zuri felt something else, a quiet acceptance. She would not be the one to stand by Jabari's side. But that didn't mean she was alone. As Pendo had said, there was enough love in the village for everyone. She just had to be open to it. And so, with the first light of a new day warming her skin, Zuri made a silent promise to herself. She would let go of the things that had held her back for so long. She would be kind. She would be strong. And she would let love, real, genuine love, into her life, in whatever form it came. As the sun rose higher, casting long shadows over the village of Kijiji, Zuri took a deep breath and stepped forward into the new day, ready to face whatever came next. As the days passed, the village of Kijiji slowly began to rebuild itself. The charred remains of homes were replaced by new structures, and the fields once ruined by the invaders began to sprout with fresh crops. Life returned to the village, but something deeper was shifting as well. A new sense of unity, of shared purpose, had emerged among the people. Zuri, too, found herself changing in ways she hadn't expected. She spent more time with the villagers, not as the once envied beauty who sought power and admiration, but as a friend, a sister, a daughter of Kijiji. The walls she had built around her heart were crumbling, and for the first time, she allowed herself to see the beauty in the simple things: laughter around the fire, children playing near the river, the quiet comfort of Pendo's companionship. Pendo became more than just a source of wisdom for Zuri. She became a true friend, someone who showed Zuri what it meant to live with an open heart. They worked together, side by side, helping rebuild the village. Whether it was mending broken fences or planting seeds in the fields, Zuri felt a deep satisfaction she had never known before. There was no jealousy here, no need to prove herself, only the joy of being part of something bigger than her own desires. But not everything was peaceful. One evening, as Zuri and Pendo sat by the river, watching the sun set in brilliant hues of orange and pink, a strange silence fell over the village. The birds that usually filled the air with song had stopped singing, and even the wind seemed to still. Zuri's heart quickened. She stood up, scanning the horizon, her instincts on high alert. Something was wrong. Pendo stood beside her, her brow furrowed in concern. "Do you feel it?" she asked quietly. Zuri nodded, her eyes narrowing. "Yes. Something's coming." They hurried back to the village, where a small group of warriors, including Jabari, had gathered in the center. The look on their faces confirmed what Zuri already feared: danger was on the horizon once again. Jabari stepped forward, his expression grave. "We've received word that the invaders are regrouping. They are planning another attack." A murmur of fear swept through the gathered villagers. The last battle had left them weary and scarred. Another attack could destroy them completely. Zuri's heart pounded in her chest, but this time it wasn't fear that surged through her, it was something else. Something fierce and unyielding. She had changed. She was no longer the girl who sought power for herself. Now, she sought something greater. "We will not let them destroy us," Zuri said, her voice strong and clear. "This village is our home. We will protect it." Jabari looked at her with surprise, but there was something else in his gaze too: respect. Zuri had proven herself in ways that went beyond beauty or charm. She had proven herself as a warrior of heart, and the village needed that now more than ever. Pendo stepped forward, her calm presence steadying the fear in the air. "We must prepare, but this time, we will face them not with anger or revenge in our hearts, but with unity. We are stronger together." The villagers nodded, their faces determined. They had been through too much to give up now. The days that followed were filled with preparations. The warriors trained tirelessly, sharpening their skills and fortifying the village's defenses. But there was something different about this time. It wasn't just about fighting, it was about protecting what they loved. The bonds between the villagers had grown stronger, and they knew that no matter what happened, they would stand together. As the fateful day of the battle approached, Zuri found herself standing by the river once again, her reflection shimmering in the water. She no longer saw the girl who had once been consumed by envy and bitterness. She saw a woman who had found her place in the world, who had learned the true meaning of strength. Pendo joined her, standing silently by her side. "I'm scared," Zuri admitted, her voice barely a whisper. Pendo smiled gently. "It's okay to be scared. It means you care." Zuri nodded, feeling the weight of what was to come. "Do you think we'll win?" Pendo looked out at the horizon, where dark clouds were gathering in the distance. "I don't know. But I do know that whatever happens, we'll face it together. And that's what matters." The battle came swiftly, like a storm crashing down upon the village. The invaders were more ruthless than before, their numbers overwhelming. But the people of Kijiji fought with everything they had, driven not by fear but by love for their home. Zuri fought alongside the warriors, her body moving with a strength she hadn't known she possessed. Jabari was at her side, his spear flashing in the sunlight as he defended their village. But it wasn't just the warriors who fought, everyone in the village played a part. Even the children helped, carrying water and supplies to the fighters. Despite their bravery, the battle seemed endless. The invaders were relentless, and slowly, the villagers began to tire. Zuri's arms ached from wielding her spear, and her breath came in ragged gasps. She could see the fear in the eyes of those around her, and for a moment, doubt crept into her heart. But then, she looked at Pendo, who stood in the midst of the chaos, calm and unwavering, a beacon of hope. And in that moment, Zuri realized something: this wasn't just a battle of strength. It was a battle of heart. She tightened her grip on her spear and pushed forward, her voice ringing out across the battlefield. "For Kijiji. For our home." The warriors rallied around her, their spirits lifted by her cry. And slowly, inch by inch, they began to turn the tide. But just as victory seemed within reach, a new threat emerged. The leader of the invaders, a towering figure with eyes as cold as stone, stepped forward. His presence seemed to suck the air out of the battlefield, and Zuri felt a chill run down her spine. He raised his hand, and in an instant, the earth trembled beneath them. A great rift opened in the ground, separating Zuri from her fellow warriors. She was alone, standing face to face with the enemy leader. Her heart pounded in her chest, but she didn't back down. She raised her spear, her eyes locked on his. "Your village will fall," the leader said, his voice as cold as his eyes. "And you will fall with it." Zuri's grip tightened on her spear, her resolve hardening. "Not today." With a fierce battle cry, she charged forward, her spear aimed straight at the enemy leader's heart. The enemy leader smirked, his cold eyes gleaming as he raised his weapon to block her attack. The sound of metal clashing echoed across the battlefield, but Zuri didn't falter. She pushed with all her strength, her feet digging into the ground as she fought against the overwhelming force of the towering figure. "You're strong," he growled, his voice full of contempt, "but strength alone isn't enough." Zuri gritted her teeth as the enemy leader shoved her back, sending her stumbling. She caught herself just in time, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel the weight of the battle all around her, the cries of the villagers, the clash of weapons, the heavy smell of smoke in the air. And yet, she refused to give in to the fear rising inside her. The leader raised his weapon again, preparing for another strike. But before he could move, Zuri heard a voice from behind her. "Zuri, I'm with you." It was Jabari. He had crossed the rift in the ground, leaping to her side. His eyes were fierce with determination, and he stood protectively beside her, his spear poised to strike. The leader of the invaders narrowed his eyes at Jabari. "You think you can stand against me, too?" Jabari's grip tightened on his spear, and he nodded firmly. "We won't let you destroy our home." The leader sneered, but before he could attack, Zuri and Jabari moved as one. Zuri aimed high, going for the leader's chest, while Jabari swung low, targeting his legs. Together, they forced the invader back, their movements fluid and in sync. The leader stumbled, momentarily caught off guard by their coordinated attack. Zuri saw the opening and lunged, driving her spear towards his heart. But at the last second, he twisted out of the way, grabbing the shaft of her spear and snapping it in half. Zuri gasped, her eyes wide as she stared at the broken weapon in her hands. The leader smirked. "You are weak." Jabari growled in frustration, stepping in front of Zuri to shield her, but the leader was already moving. With one swift motion, he knocked Jabari to the ground, sending his spear flying out of reach. For a moment, Zuri felt a wave of despair wash over her. Their weapons were gone. The leader of the invaders was too strong. They were going to lose everything. But then, in the distance, she saw Pendo. The wise elder stood on the edge of the battlefield, her calm gaze fixed on Zuri. She raised her hand, and in it, she held something small but powerful, the amulet that had been passed down through the generations, the one that held the spirit of the ancestors. Pendo's voice rang out, clear and steady. "Zuri, the power is within you. It always has been." Zuri's heart skipped a beat as she locked eyes with Pendo. She had heard the stories of the amulet's power, but she had never truly believed it could make a difference. But now, with everything on the line, she felt something stir deep within her. She dropped the broken spear and raised her hands, reaching out to Pendo as the amulet began to glow with a brilliant light. The warmth of the ancestors' spirits flowed through her, filling her with a strength she had never known. The leader of the invaders sneered. "What is this?" Zuri stood tall, her hands still glowing with the light of the amulet. "This is our home. And you will never take it from us." With a fierce battle cry, Zuri unleashed the power of the ancestors. The light from her hands erupted in a blinding flash, surrounding the leader and the invaders. The ground trembled beneath them as the power of the village's spirit surged through the battlefield. The leader let out a roar of rage, but he was no match for the force of the ancestors. The light overwhelmed him, pushing him back, until he disappeared into the swirling vortex of power. The invaders, seeing their leader fall, fled in terror, their weapons clattering to the ground as they ran. Zuri collapsed to her knees, panting as the light from the amulet faded. The battlefield was silent now, save for the soft rustle of the wind and the distant cheers of the villagers. Jabari, bruised and battered, crawled to her side, a look of awe on his face. You did it." Zuri looked up at him, her chest heaving with exhaustion. "No," she whispered, "we did it. All of us." The village of Kijiji had been saved, but the victory was not just Zuri's. It belonged to everyone who had fought, everyone who had believed in the power of their home. Together, they had won the battle. But Zuri knew that the journey was far from over. As the villagers gathered around her, cheering and celebrating, Zuri glanced at the horizon. The darkness was gone, but a new challenge loomed in the distance.